Welcome back to Watchbox Studios and Watches Tonight. We've got a fun show on the agenda.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian and thank you for logging on.
Dinesh V with our next question. What unexpected surprises have you found in the mainstream brands like Rolex, Breitling, Swatch, and Richemont brands? Is there more than meets the eye when shopping these lines? Yes, actually, that's a good question. There's quite a bit more than meets the eye. First, let's start with some brands that I consider to be mainstream, so 10,000 watches a year or more. Compared to FP Journe and Dufour, that is mainstream. Omega, the Tourbillon. Let's just state it right out, because it's so different. It's insane that Omega does this. Breitling had a tourbillon. It was made entirely by Audemars Piguet Renoir Papi. Breitling had nothing to do with it. Tag Heuer has a tourbillon. It's not a high horology tourbillon. It's an industrially finished thing. There's a reason Omega's costs 10 times as much, and Rolex has no equivalent. Plus, next year is the 25th anniversary of the Omega tourbillon, well, the central tourbillon anyway, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Just, Omega, please, don't dovetail the Moonwatch 50th anniversary and the tourbillon anniversary. Keep those things separate, please. Now, clasps. Rolex has its high highs with the Deep Sea, the Sea Dweller, and the Submariner, but every Omega clasp feels more expensive than it is. You find clasps as robust as a Rolex diver on a basic bracelet-clad $5,250 Speedmaster Professional. That's how good Omega clasps are across the board. If you want the absolute finest clasp Omega offers, guess what? You can now get it on the Diver 300 meter in the Seamaster family. You no longer have to go to a Ploprof. Omega doing clasps right. Rolex. The biggest surprise I found? Color, and just how much there is. There's the D Blue with its green and its blue. There's the, well, a shocking amount of color on the Milgauss Z Blue. You get orange, you get green, you get electric blue. The more you look, the more you find. You have red grape, you have white wine, you have dark rhodium with cyan accents. That is the surprise at Rolex. What a sense of humor and a sense of levity they have in their use of color. Proof that Rolex can crack a smile. Breitling, straps, across the board that feel fit for $50,000 watches. You pick up a $7,000 Breitling and it's got a strap that looks worthy of a Patek Philippe Grand Complication. You get alligator where you expect calf. You get thick cut where you expect thin. And you get a level of quality in the hand that eyes closed would never lead you to guess you're looking at a sub $10,000 watch. Plus, Breitling bezels with the rider tabs, the chimney buffers, and the captured bezel technology, they could double as brass knuckles, so I'm throwing those in there too. Jaeger-LeCoultre, service costs. On my Amvox 2, an articulated case chronograph with a lockout lever and a 280-part movement with over 300 total moving parts. For a full refinishing and service, I paid $910. Most brands are going to charge you that for 3 hands and a date. JLC, you continue to impress. My perpetual calendar automatic winding alarm was $1,700. That's about the price of servicing an automatic 3-hand watch with Audemars Piguet. And when I sent a watch into Audemars Piguet with water damage back in the old Watch You Want company, we got a client Royal Oak Chrono with water damage. It went back to AP, came back with a $10,000 bill. Jaeger-LeCoultre serviced a water-damaged minute repeater that needed movement part replacement for $4,000. That's a minute repeater. JLC, your service costs surprise and impress me. Finally, Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko impresses with its dials. 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 steps in the fabrication. Lacquer, galvanizing, stamping, engraving, and the dial furniture, the hour indices, the hands, the logos. Everything on a Grand Seiko dial feels like it belongs on a Crador Grand Seiko dial. And I'll say that along with case finish, spring drive, the dials are one area in which Grand Seiko has caught and passed the Swiss standard of Rolex. Okay, a totally different take on the watch. This is the watch that you can't stop watching. This is the Ressence Type 1 Squared. Now, this is the Type 1 Ruthenium Silver. It's a variant of the Ressence Type 1 that launched in 2017, and it was the first square Ressence watch, but it was also the first Ressence watch to feature what frankly should have been standard fitment from the first a caseback setting lever. So you can finally cycle that Ressence Orbital Convex System planetary display, and you see how everything moves in sync. It's like the solar system. Every body is spinning even as it orbits the sun. You'll also note, because all the displays are separate, it's a regulator, and it's beautifully loomed. This is also the slimmest Ressence you can buy at about 11.8 millimeters thick. It's got a little bit of wire lug radiometer in it.
Yeah, I mean, I love these watches, and I think that they did two things that really stood out to me that I thought was so great. And the first one is that, you know, we see a lot of watches doing what we do, and it's very rare that I think nowadays somebody executes a watch that is so vastly different than anything that's been done before or anything that anybody else is doing. And this is that. Like, nobody's doing anything like this. And it was and you could see that the person that created this brand and this line really was more of a coming from the design side and less being a watchmaker. And the second thing is that they're very upfront that they use an ETA base to this watch. Like, they're the first one to say, hey, like, you know, this is not a, you know, it's a altered ETA movement, but they're the first ones to say, hey, like, this isn't, you know, we're not here going to tell you that this is an in-house movement and all of these things. Like, they're very upfront about what the components of the watch are, and it's just a beautiful execution of a movement that's been available for a very long time.
Yeah, the nice thing about this watch, first of all, by the way, guys, right there you can see that it is 10 o'clock. It's a regulator dial, radially the minute scale. The hour indicator is the second largest. It has the Ressence hand at 12. And here's how the quickset system works. You turn it in one direction and you quick set the day. This is a day indicator, and right now the day is pointing to Sunday. So it's Sunday morning at 10 a.m.
Show the back, the lever.
Oh yeah, well, the lever is the best part, because in the past...
In the past they didn't have this, but now they have this lever that you can actually use to either wind the watch or set the time. And, you know, I get a lot of questions about Ressence and where it fits in the market, and a watch like this actually, you know, I would say, for, you know, if I was going to compare it to other brands that are similar, it actually does quite well, and they sell quite fast in the secondary market because they only make a couple hundred watches per year. Not many of them enter the secondary market. And it's the kind of watch that really doesn't have that much competition against any other brand. I mean, you know, when you think about a Voudin and a Laurent Ferrier, there's a lot of these independents that have similar looks and feels, but as an independent, nothing looks like a Ressence, and I just think that that's what sets it apart, and that's what makes it a great watch to have in any collection. I honestly really want one.
I like the fact that they all ride their bikes to work in the Belgian office. That's what I love everything about them. That is true. I met them and I talked to them about their bikes at SIHH. It's one of my best memories from the show, and I had a lot of good ones. The nice thing about this is a less complicated one. The Type 3 has an oil-filled dial that will increase both the thickness of the watch and downstream servicing costs. The Type 1 is essentially a flush sapphire, so you have that German silver dial, concentric circular brushed finish, and then you've got the sapphire immediately over it. The sapphire pretty much disappears, and again, this is the flattest Ressence you can buy. They range from fairly flat with the Type 1 to fairly flat with the Top 5 diver. But this one's also a little bit uncommon because it's on a full deployant clasp. You can see this is not something that Ressence generally does. They're generally on pin buckles. This is the full Ressence steel deployant. That's a nice addition to have if you were buying secondary.
Quick question from my good friend Ted. Ted, don't they make a great dive watch? Also, Ted, they do make a great dive watch. It is the Type 5. It's an oil-filled watch, and it's going to be the biggest three of the various models. And they do it in titanium, like a gray titanium. They do it in a black steel. So I mean, my favorite two, I would say, are the Type 5 and the Type 1. Size-wise, for me, the Type 1 probably would fit the best. If I had a slightly bigger wrist, I would love to rock the Type 5.
The Type 5 is nice. It's got a system that actually locks the case back so you can't accidentally change the time because it is a diver. It has a rotating bezel. But because you can accidentally change the time with the case back of a Ressence, they also have to lock the dial. So it has a bezel that's unidirectional, and it also has a locking dial. The problem is it's just a big mound on your wrist, which is cool because it's very...
It's awesome. They have cool straps. Like,
it's commando.
I mean, it's more expensive than a Type 1. So, you know, I think that it ends up being a different price point. The Type 1 is, I think, low 20s, and then the Type 5 gets in somewhere to the mid 30s. So it's definitely a different price point, but it's also a very different look. But it's cool. There's no other dive watch like it. Like you can have that in your collection, and there's nothing else that will look like it.
There is one crazy thing that's a little bit like it. If you guys are familiar with the Zen UX, you know there is another oil-filled watch, but it looks nothing like the Ressence, and it's completely different principle. But there is another oil-filled watch, and they built one for Bell and Ross at one point. So that's the history of oil-filled dive watches.